Hey guys, we're back here at Chino Valley Muffler Performance. Gonna install this new REIKA suspension system on this 2018 Subaru Outback. We're gonna go through the kit right now to start. We have our front spacers. We also have a driver and a passenger side for this kit, which is gonna be marked D and P. We have our sway bar in-link brackets, which these are gonna relocate the sway bar to combine with the upper strut tower spacers. We have our rear spacers, and then we have our relocation bracket for our rear sway bar. We also in the kit, we're gonna have these, which are gonna be for the brake lines, to relocate the brake lines lower. These relocation brackets for the sway bar are gonna work on 15 through 19. And then the 6th gen, it'll be pretty much the same kit without these relocation brackets. All right guys, now we're here back at the vehicle. We got the vehicle up, secured on some jack stands, and the wheel off. We're gonna start with disconnecting the front sway bar in-link, and we're gonna do both sides, so then it's easier to come off when we do. This is gonna be with a 17mm socket, and you might have to use a T6 to get that out of there. Move that out of the way. Then we're gonna go down and do our ABS line, which you're gonna just use a little panel removal tool to undo the clip. And then now we're gonna use a 10mm socket to undo the bolt that's holding the ABS line on to the spindle. Pull that, and we're gonna move that out of the way. All right guys, next we're gonna be disconnecting the brake line bracket from the strut itself. It's gonna be a 12mm. And you're gonna move that off to the side as well. Next, we're gonna be removing these two large bolts. One is a cam adjust bolt. So I would recommend marking the top one. So when you put it back together, it's aligned as best as possible. It's still gonna need an alignment at the end of the day. All right, these are gonna be taking a 19mm or 3/4 inch. Once you remove both the bolts, you're going to want to set the spindle to the side and tie it off to the lower control arm so the axle shaft doesn't pop out. All right guys, now that we've got the whole bottom disconnected, we're going to work on the top. You're going to need a 12mm socket, and you're just going to be loosening these bad boys. Now the strut will just come right out. All right guys, now that we've got the strut out of the vehicle, back onto the bench, we're gonna be installing our spacers. And these are gonna go pretty much on any way with your factory hardware, which is gonna be the 12mm. All right, now that we've got all these hand tight, we're just gonna snug them down, and then we're gonna torque them to a 30 foot-pound. All right, now that we've got the upper spacer on the strut, we can put it back in the vehicle. And make sure to have that orientation once the strut goes back in the correct location. Where you're gonna see the REIKA symbol is gonna be about a 45 into the engine compartment. You're also probably going to want a buddy to help you, one person down below holding it up and somebody else threading some nuts on. All right, so now that we've got it up in here, we're just going to have them finger tight so we can go back down and reconnect the strut to the spindle. All right, now that we got the strut back in the vehicle, we're going to be connecting the
2 lower spindle nuts. Just connect our little tie strap there, and just be careful not to pull the axle out when you're putting this guy back in there. And we'll do the lower. Actually, we're going to do the upper bolt first, which is actually the cam bolt. And then the lower ones will come through. And use the top one with a washer. And just get those hand tight for now, because then we're going to want to readjust that upper cam bolt to our markings that we made earlier. All right, now that we got our spindle torqued down to 95 foot-pounds, which is going to be the factory spec, we're going to go back and put the brake line back where it needs to go with our 12 millimeter. That's just going to go back into its factory location. And then we're going to come back onto the other side here and reconnect our ABS line. Get our ABS line in there. And connect the taplet there. And now we're going to be working on the sway bar. All right, so we're going to be putting our sway bar in-link relocation bracket on. You're going to start with the washer here. It's going to go on into the bottom hole with your factory hardware. And then this is going to go onto the factory mount on the strut. All right, so got the sway bar in-link relocation bracket on, and we're going to use the hardware provided in the kit. All right, so as we are putting the ABS sensor back in, we're going to want to change this because there's a little bit of taut on the line here. So you can just pull this off with your panel remover and just flip it around, which gives it a bit more play. Go ahead and tighten down our sway bar. And now we're going to go up top and torque the top 14 millimeter bolts. All right, now we're going to be torquing these 14 millimeters down. And we're going to be torquing these down to 30 foot-pounds as well. All right, guys, now that we're done with the front, we're going to move our way back to the back. We've already got it up on jack stands, safely supported. The tires off, and we're going to actually jump inside first to start taking apart the interior panels. So come with me. And we got to start by pulling out all the rear interior panels here. And in the instructions, it might have you pull off these little plastic clips, but 90% of the time they do break off. And as you can see, we've got good access to these 14 millimeter top strut bolts. And we're going to start by loosening those up. You're going to want to retain these factory nuts because we're using them later. All right, guys, now that we're back underneath the vehicle, we're going to start with loosening up this lower sway bar in-link. And we're just going to loosen it. We're not going to take it out. That's going to be with a 14 millimeter wrench and socket. Just going to want to leave that loose. Then we're going to go up to the actual bracket itself with a 12 millimeter, and we're going to remove that one. Set those aside because we're going to be using them later. And this guy is going to come right out. Let it drop down. Then we're going to go back up on the lower control arm up next to the subframe, and we're going to be loosening this 17 millimeter. We're not going to be taking it off, just loosening it up. right, now that we got that loose, we can actually start by removing the 17 millimeter at the spindle. And we're going to need a wrench on the backside to hold the nut. That's out of there, we can go back to our strut itself and we're going to remove the lower strut nut. That's also going to be with a 17 millimeter. Alright guys, now that we've got the strut out of the vehicle, we're back at the bench and we're going to be using our 1-inch spacer here. When you put this on, you're going to have to kind of feed it through and get it a little hand tight. Once we got them both on there, we're going to use our 14 millimeter wrench to snug them up and torque them to 30 foot-pounds. All right, now we got the strut all put back together. We can put it back up in the vehicle. You are going to need another set of hands to just hand tighten the bolts here at the top. While I'm holding it up, I got a helper just putting the nuts on. And you want to leave that loose so you have a little bit of play once you get the control arm back up on there. Alright guys, we got the strut back in place here. We're going to lift the lower control arm, and first off we're going to put the bolt back in where the strut is. Once you got that bolt in, then we're going to put the bolt in for the knuckle itself. And on all these, we're just going to be doing them snug, so once we get the vehicle back on the ground, we can cycle the suspension and then go back and torque everything. All right, now that we've got the lower control arm all bolted back up, nothing's torqued down yet, we're gonna move to the sway bar. And when you do the sway bar, you're gonna wanna do it simultaneously, both right and left side at the same time. If not, you're gonna be working against a bunch of pressure. We're gonna start with this newly supplied lowering bracket and hardware. Gonna be these Allen All right, now we're gonna put our bushing back in place here onto the sway bar itself. And we're gonna be using the factory tab. So normally this tab goes in the up position, but now that we've got the drop down bracket, it's gonna go on the bottom. And we're gonna be using our factory hardware to install that. All right guys, now that we've got the sway bar connected, the struts in, we're gonna work back to the wheel well of the vehicle. And most kits don't come with a brake line relocator, but ours does. So if you see all this tension on this brake line, we're gonna actually remove this for the 12 millimeter. And in the kit, you're gonna get this bracket. It's gonna be facing back to loosen up that line. Now you see you got some movement. All right, now that we got it on the ground, we can go ahead and torque these bad boys up to 30 foot-pounds. All All right, last but not least, we're gonna cycle the suspension and then we're gonna go ahead and torque these back down to factory specs of 95 foot-pounds. All right, guys, we just finished the install on this 2-inch REIKA suspension system on this 2018 Subaru Outback. Now this kit will fit on the Gen 5 and Gen 6s. Obviously you saw it's pretty easy, some basic hand tools, maybe a buddy to help. This kit you can also put 235 65 R17 tires on with a combo of a 17x8 positive 35 offset wheel. All right, now we're gonna take it over to the alignment shop, have them square it all up, and we'll be on the road.